Yo, all right. We're gonna get started here. Got some people tuned in, so yeah, welcome. We're just listening to this example of nice, groovy, dark, psychedelic, funky forest. It's generally just referred to as forest psytrance. This was tuned by the French artist Crepel. Yeah, it's a good typical example of this really intricate, multi-layered, very psychedelic focused version of psytrance. Trance music, of course, like every genre, has a lot of different subgenres to get into. We're going to cover kind of general trance stuff, approaches that you can see as like the basis of trance music, and then pushing it into whatever subgenre style you want, with a couple different kind of examples of that. Got that tune and another Parvati Records tune. That's reminding me that these tracks are like, yeah, almost 10 minutes long, 8 or 9 some minutes long. Some genre differences, like this tune that I got laid out here that I just threw stuff together to get us started today, so you just have a bit more of a direct start to this stuff. You can see got it laid out to like 6 minutes. But anyways, yeah, we'll keep these tunes as good kind of reference tracks in a way, though we're not going to be specifically doing those exact genre sounds. But yeah, that being said, let's get started. I'll move my reference tracks up here. So again, yeah, getting started here. I've got my Ableton set up. Of course, on the main master channel, I've just got my streaming plugins here and my headphone monitoring software here. So that's what that is. Otherwise, the channel's just open. I've just got a limiter bumping a little bit on the master channel here for the good sound. And yeah, let's start with just having a listen to what we got going on here. Control A to select all, and then 0 to turn these tracks all back on. And just an overview of what we got here. Got stuff divided up into a couple of categories. A leads bus here, some pads here, and sound effects, other layers that you see here playing in the intro and stuff. The percussion bus and the kick and bass bus up here with the triggers for the side chains here. So yeah, that's what we got going on. Let's just give it a listen and get into it. Okay. Yeah, so I put together just this little tune. You know, it's kind of simple. Obviously, it doesn't have like, you know, tons of layers and work put into it yet. But yeah, it kind of combines two different ideas and approaches to trance, like being more of like a just considered like a, you know, psychedelic like psytrance approach, with a lot of these leads and stuff here that are more the kind of atonal psychedelic sounding stuff, and then this big more of like a normal trance music, you know, progressive trance, whatever, 90s, you know, kind of rave trance stuff with like the big super solid leads sounding more like, you know, EDM kind of style. Just kind of combine those two together because to give different examples, because yeah, they're just two different approaches to stuff that generally all share the same kind of core principles of trance music. Like, well, let's take it from the top and start with trance music. Obviously, coming from the real basis of it is that kick and bass pattern, you know, that you have. So we can flip over to the session view here in Ableton and see where I started by. Again, I'll select all these trigger tracks and just shrink them down like that, take up less space. And I started by just creating, you know, two MIDI channels, and I have the kick and the bass here. And then created that pattern where you see I have just a 1 bar, 1 measure pattern here. And it's divided into 16th notes. You can see here. There's 4, and there's 4. Well, no, sorry, it's not. It's this whole section is 1 measure. Like if you just double click on Ableton clip, it'll create a 1 measure clip. I just have a quarter of a clip, or a quarter of a measure, 1/4 bar looped here, because that's all you need to create the basic pattern. So a quarter of a measure in 16th notes is 4 16th notes here. And so you can see we have the kick on the first one. And then if I shift select the other ones, you can see, and then we have the 3 bass notes here. You know, this is the whole, you know, root of trance music, where they discovered the phenomenon of having a kick followed by repeated bass notes, creates this steady fluctuation, basically this steady wave between the kick and the bass. Lots of other genres do that too, like you know, techno and other stuff does that too. But trance music is special in the way that it really creates this almost like fluid wave, basically, of the steady, you know, that steady dun 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 dun, you know, rolling bass pattern. So I have that created here. That's, you know, the foundation of any, you know, it's what makes trance music what it is. I have those two here put into the kick, bass, bus, and if we listen to that, I can just play it here. Yeah, so breaking that down, I've got kick 2 again. You don't have to use kick 2. You can use any kick sample or kick synthesis method or plugin or whatever. I'll do a future lesson on going in depth into percussion synthesis, like synthesizing kick drums from scratch and stuff like that, because it can be fun. And it's relatively simple and rewarding. You can use stuff like kick 2 also, that is very, very easy and intuitive. Like I mentioned in previous lessons, kick 2 is nice and super easy because you've got this layout of the waveform and the tuning parameters of it here. The bass note I'm using here is a D sharp here. D sharp, I've got my kick dropping down into this D sharp, octave 2, D sharp, octave 4, 2, and 1 here. And then kick 2, of course, gives you all these other controls over like the amplitude and stuff like that, the kick and shaping it, the clicks of the, giving like the transient click of the kick. And a lot of, you know, easy intuitive control there. Again, it's not telling you have to use kick 2, but in this example, that's what we're doing. Trance music especially is important mean, it's kind of generally important in most things, but especially in trance music, it's very important to have your kick tuned in tune with your bass. If you don't do it, it'll just sound dissonant, you know, if you have the kick playing several hundred times in a 6-8 minute track, with the bass back and forth, if they're not playing the same pitch, then it'll sound weird. Sometimes people debate about tuning of drums. The initial transient period up here, you can see where the wave form is really squished together so much that it becomes like a solid white, section up here. The transient, and you can see the pitch dropping. Again, the pitch, that's what creates, drum sounds, and kick drum sounds is the pitch of a sine wave dropping very sharply, like that, that dropping from a very high octave to a low octave suddenly in a very short space. That's what creates that transient. That's just like the physical properties of, like, if you record a drum sound and look at the waveform and stuff, that's what it is. And so synthesizing it works the same way. Then that initial transient period there doesn't really have a pitch. It just sounds, that's just the whack, part of the drum. But out here where you see the waveform spaced out a lot more, that definitely does have a pitch. If you were to loop just that part, you can loop just the tail end of the kick and loop it and play it. Play it in a fast loop. It oscillates just like any sine wave, and it plays a tone. So you want that tone to be the same as your bass note. Anyways, so I've got my kick programmed in there, just one kick hit there. And you can hear, if your ears can pick that up, you can hear that tone of it, and you can hear the tone of the bass, although the bass is kind of hard to hear in isolation like that. But yeah, the kick is just being minimally processed. I've just got it in full mono in this case, coming out kick 2 in mono anyways, but it's just full mono with the bass here. Got some minimal EQing, just so, like, sloping off the bit of the highs, like that 1K to 10K range up here. We're giving it the kind of the crisp, like, smack kind of sound of the kick drum. So, like, I just want that reduced, like, to taste in this case a little bit. Yeah, you can just hear that change. So I have the crisp high of the kick reduced a little bit because that's just kind of how it just gels together, and that kick bass line gelling together is kind of the word. That's what you want, as you can see when you select these two. You see the MIDI note of the kick there, and then the bass notes together. It all rolls into one. People get really super nerdy and teched out with kick bass lines in trance, and actually have it, like, some people will, like, make, like, the waveforms match and stuff, and I could show that in a second. But anyways, I got the kick programmed there. Boom, done. Not even blowing up the transient on it that much. It just smacks good enough, and it's plenty loud. Then the bass note. The bass is more important, finicky kind of. I'll do a couple different examples here. I'm just going to take this channel and duplicate it, and put a different synth on it. We'll put an operator on it, and I'll demonstrate with an operator synth what that's like. If I play this note, an operator, again, just operator because of just like an easy go-to, general synth. We're going to play a saw wave. And we're going to use the filter to pluck up that saw wave. So I'm going to click on the filter tab, go over to the filter, bring that filter down here, and then turn the envelope of it up. And the envelope, this sharp envelope curve, is what's going to bring that filter up and make it pop. Yeah, you can hear that. Sounds like the thing we're looking for. Then a lot of it's fine tuning, adjusting, like, the frequency, starting frequency of the filter, the envelope timing. And you get something like that. And combined with the kick. Changing the note, whatever note we want to play for this. Yeah, it's a really simple thing in theory that masters of trance have taken a lot of time to perfect, perfecting that sound. It's very simple to do, takes tweaking and experience just to get it like sounding really perfect. But in theory, it's quite simple. It's just a sine, it's just a saw wave dropping really suddenly. I don't have the envelope. I'm not even using the envelope of the oscillator itself here, of the envelope of the amp of the oscillator, the VC, the amplitude of the oscillator. I'm just using the filter envelope here to open up the filter and give that pluck of the bass note. That's an example in operator. You could do this in whatever synth you wanted, really, because it's just doing that simple thing I explained of the simple single saw wave being in the low pass filter being plucked from a low frequency up, you know, to give that bump pattern. But in trance music, there's just a thing that this plugin Silent One by Lennar Digital Silent just sounds really, it just does the trance bass like really well. I don't know why it is, but it's just Silent is a virtual analog modeling plugin, you know, that actually it just sounds really good. I don't know why. It's just something about it. We could compare the results here. You know, you hear the operator version. Like, it sounds okay, you know. Oh, the other thing about trance bass is like this, because it's such a minimalistic thing happening of just the kick and that triple pluck of the saw wave. It can sound kind of weird on its own. If you just play anything, along with it, it sounds like sounds like a lot better. So let's just go to a section here where we've got sound effects playing and just play that through. Yeah, and you hear how like just having some other noise in there just like helps this like sound of with the trance bass and stuff like gel together like so much better. It sounds, and then if you listen to it on its own, just naked, you know, like it sounds fine. It kind of hurts your ears, and it's kind of hurts your ears, and it's kind of rough because it's just this very rough, minimal, you know, waves being plucked over and over and over again. But anyway, so we'll listen to it with operator here and then switch to the silent version, and I think, you know, silence just like sounds better. So there's something about just the characteristics of this synth. I don't know. It's not like you have to use it, but it's just like when I was getting into trance production like years ago and stuff, it was just one of the go-to things you learn about, and like silence just sounds really good for some reason. A lot of it has to do with well, there are some things about the synth, like, again, if you recall any of the previous lessons I did going over basic synthesizer parts, they're all the same, you know, of being like, you get your oscillators here, you have your envelopes for the amp, you know, like the guitar, think guitar amp, you know, amplifying the sound. Amplitude envelopes here, your filter here, and your modulation envelopes here, and LFOs and stuff. It's all the same stuff, you know, it's just that there's some tiny, small differences in different synthesizers. One thing is that this Silent has this invert waveform switch, which inverts. You see the sine wave being shown here. It just inverts it, meaning it flips it. It just, instead of starting from the top going down, it starts from the bottom going up, kind of thing, you know. And there's something about that sounds really good, you know. We just turn that on and off. Here, like with it not inverted, it's a lot more bassy, and something about inverting it just sounds like a bit flatter and drier, because actually in trance production, that's often what you want, is like a bass line that sounds a bit flatter and drier, contrary to what you might think. Like, well, the other one had more bass to it and sounded fuller. Like, yeah, but actually in practice, when you're making this kind of trance bass line, it's being played back on like a Function 1 club sound system at very high volume for a long time. It's always, I mean, I've been to a lot of psytrance indoor and outdoor events, and like the bass line's always just louder than everything else in the music, you know? So like you actually want to have like a kick and bass like reduced like more than you would think initially, because in playback purposes, it's still going to be plenty loud. And so anyways, I'm just kind of going on my tangent about Silent One. This is a good synth for if you're serious about making like trance music and psytrance music, I would say definitely check it out, because it's just kind of one of those go-to things. Everyone has their favorite and their own techniques. And as you can hear, using other synths, it sounds fine too, but there's something just good about this one. And so you can see here, I'm just adjusting the envelope using these functions here, this knob, the modulation amount of the envelope, you know, how much the envelope is affecting the filter. You can see here it's going to cut off A of the filter. We're using one oscillator here. Oscillator A, volume turned up all the way, voices 1. Oscillator A2, voices 0, volume turned down. Part B, yeah, nothing. We're just using single saw wave oscillator here into single, you know, low pass filter here. Just have the cutoff adjusted to wherever, you know, works for you. Driving filters generally actually, I mean, you can do it, but it doesn't really help the psytrance bass sound. Actually, it really kind of, yeah, again, you're keeping it pretty minimal. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. So going on about bass. Kick and bass is the main part of the psytrance and trance thing, obviously, so it definitely is worth you know, talking about. But yeah, you just have that modulation of the envelope, the no attack, sustain or release, just a little bit of the decay, and the adjustment of how much that envelope's affecting the filter, and the position of the cutoff of the filter, adjusting it to taste. I'll just play with it a little bit here and show you how that changes the sound. So it's just about dialing it into what you want here. Yeah, you can hear there's like this sweet spot that you can find where if the filter's open too much, if the cutoff is open too much, then you don't get the right kind of cut in the bass sound, and just, yeah, adjusting that for taste. That's just one of those things you figure out. But generally you can also see, like, this is a good visualization of it here too. And operator, you can see you have the synth, the cutoff of the filter just set down here in this range, with the resonance down, not all the way, but not peaking up like that. Resonance down just a little bit, and the envelope plucking it up. So anyways, yeah, so there we got our kick and our bass line. I have just some, again, minimal EQing done on the bass line, dropping the highs a little bit and boosting the lows a little bit. You know, just enough that like it's just boosting the sub of it a little bit. And yeah, I'm not really clipping the bass here. You can see got it in mono. I'm pushing the volume with the makeup here, but I'm not clipping it, and I'm also not compressing it. I'm really just using this as just a makeup gain to increase it a little bit. And it's protected by this soft clip amount, which we're not hitting. Unlike drum and bass and other kinds of electronic music like dubstep and stuff, like you don't want to clip stuff really as much. Like you don't really want to clip psytrance bass as much, or if at all. Unlike some stuff, like clipping things and distortion and drum and bass is, like, you know, a big part of sound design too. But in this case, keeping things just a little more clean. Like I don't have my EQ clipping up here or the clipper being used down here. It's just there. And then I have a sidechain going from the kick If you recall, in previous lessons, I've shown that where I have just copies of the same MIDI track pattern from the kick, just the same, that's a snare, just the same pattern, the same, note from the kick into empty MIDI tracks with nothing on them, but then the MIDI note is being sent, like this one, kick trig 1, it's being sent to bass, to the shaper box here, comes out, side chaining, and then you can see in the display here, you can see the bass wave popping up. And again, this is also a quarter measure timing down here, and so this grid of 4 is also 16th notes, so you can see the kick is being sloped off here, and then it's coming back up to allow the bass to come in these last 3 16th notes here. You can see that happen. Yeah, side chaining the bass to the kick. It goes into the bus. I have the filter, low pass filtering. I also got the just a tube amp emulation here, just giving, not distorting, but just boosting the volume with a little bit of saturation from this tube amp plugin. This one again is from Voxengo. This is free. It's free in the Voxengo free plugins pack. I have it linked in the Discord group. It's good, I use it all the time on stuff. For distortion or for just a little bit of saturation, like in this case, just pushing the drive up a little bit. For this plugin specifically, you can use saturation here. You can turn on this is a clipper function here. You can turn that on if you want to clip the output of this. But I have this set at 8 times X. This is oversampling amount. So normally it's at 1 times that, but you can increase the oversampling amount for better sound quality, mildly better, it's just more CPU intensive and stuff in your computer. But because again, remember, digital sound is a whole lot of little samples all stacked up like pixels in an image to make a full sound wave. So oversampling is just sampling that stuff more than the default sampling of all those little steps to create the sound, to create the wave of the sound. Oversampling is just sampling more of that. So you could think this is sampling at 8 times the amount of it than normally. And in this case, with something like saturation, where saturation or distortion is adding harmonic content or just adding frequencies to the signal, it's adding noise, adding sound to the sound. Oversampling can be good. Anyways, that's what I'm doing there with the tube amp plugin. Tube amp's good. Get it, with the Voxengo free plugin pack. You got a limiter on the end, just pushing up a little bit. Doing a little bit of gain reduction and just pushing it enough in the sweet spot of where it sounds good, it's not smashing it, it's not crushing it in a bad way, but it's just clipping it and pushing it up again to get that. You can hear with it off, and granted, things louder always sound better to the human ear in this kind of case. So there's a placebo effect of just increasing the volume and thinking, oh yeah, it sounds better. But it actually does fatten up the sound and just kind of smush it together a bit more. And again, like gelling or smooshing together this kick bass line thing of trance is really what you're going for. So that really helps, So I've got the limiter on there. And then I've got this auto filter, low pass filter with the frequency just sweeping up in that intro where I do that intro drop. Here. Yeah, just sweeping it in for that kind of intro, classic intro thing of, And then here, in this case, I feel like I put the highs even a little bit more in this overall kick bass bus. Yeah. And then in this case, after the sweep up of the filter there, then I have the power switch of it here. I have the plugin just automated just to turn it off here completely. I'm also turning it on when the line starts, but just turning it off here completely so that the filter just completely goes off out of the chain once the bass drops fully. Yeah. Basic automation kind of ideas again of how to create movement and add, you know, movement and feeling and stuff to your arrangements. And Ableton, I click this to go back and forth between automation view. Yeah. So that's the kick and the bass. I spent a lot of time on that, but that's, or explaining that, but it's generally a core part of, you know, the track. You can hear it without. You can hear we've got some atmospheric stuff and some of these like psytrance, more darker psytrance characteristic leads giving sound there. We had the comment in the chat before about atmospheric elements being heavy in psytrance. Like, yes, they are. That's generally the challenge in psytrance music is people will go overboard with the atmospheres and the reverb and having so many layers of stuff playing on top of each other that it can get muddled and, you know, start to just sound muddy. People use the word muddy to describe when something becomes, you know, not clear. So that's a common issue in psychedelic trance, but you can hear it in professional examples like this. I mean, if we listen to this grapple song again as a reference, you know, you can hear the layers and layers of atmosphere in there that are done right, you know, because when done well, you've got a lot of these moving and falling and psychedelic atmospheres, all these atmospheric sounds going like, and, you know, everything flowing around like that. Layered correctly, it sounds really good. Yeah, I mean, obviously they just got a lot going on in there. They just have a lot more layers playing than, you know, we do in this project right now. But it's essentially this, you know, same kind of thing of got your sound effects layers down here. Let's jump down to this group down here, SFX bus, and got a couple different things playing here. Okay, first of all, a classic, a psytrance classic technique here in this bubbly sound. Okay, so we're going to take time to explain stuff that you'll see as a common theme in psytrance and common techniques. The bandpass filter. We're using a bandpass filter here with the resonance pushed all the way up. Filters can be self-oscillating, meaning when the resonance is pushed all the way up, you know, resonance is like, it's like the volume point of that point of the filter. And if the resonance is pushed all the way up, it'll do a thing called self-oscillating, where it will produce its own tones. It'll oscillate at that high volume and produce its own sound. Not all filters are self-oscillating, but many of them are. A lot of them are. And in this case, using a bandpass filter to sweep, again, you're using that narrow V shape to sweep through the frequency range of a sound is filtering it a lot, you know, into that small range. You can see we're using a bandpass filter at the 24 decibel per octave slope here. If you change it to 12, you see the filter widens out a lot here. So narrow bandpass filter, and it's sweeping back and forth using the LFO here, set at a rate that just, you know, is to taste, you know, not too fast, not too slow, sweeping back and forth, and the range set 40%, so it's covering 40% of the whole frequency range when it's moving back and forth. And I've got the envelope for the filter set at a little bit, so it also moves up a little bit when the note triggers. And then I just have some low note. Yeah, you see here, the D sharp octave -2. So like a very, very low sound that's not even being used to hear the synth. And I've also got the synth set at a half course, like low octave setting here. So if we turn all this stuff off, then I'll hit Control A to select all. Oops. Control A to select all, 0 to turn it all off, and then turn the synth back on. You can hear what this lovely sound sounds like without any effects. It is a bunch of clicking noises. Just to trigger the bandpass filter. If you turn the bandpass filter on, though, those clicking noises into the filter, because it's like it's feeding the filter, putting sound into it to drive it and drive its self-oscillation here. Yeah. And then you put it all into delay, add delay and reverb. Yeah, and there we go, the magic happens, you know. Trance music, especially psytrance, it's like a meme, you know. Yeah, like in other styles of music, but yeah, put the delay and the reverb on it. And then it sounds good. Like, yeah, but it's true. But that being said, again, about the topic of having too many layers playing and over saturating your mix with too much stuff playing, too much reverb, too much delay, too much echo and washed out reverb stacked up together can just creates a mess. So you also got to not overdo it. But in this case, I've got the delay. Again, we're using Ableton stock plugins here. But the concepts are all the same. Doesn't matter if you're using FL or any other DAW or other plugins. The concept's all the same. Bandpass filter, synth, playing a very, very low note, just a super low trigger note, basically, into a bandpass filter with the self oscillation turned all the way up. You can still hear it if you turn it down, but if you turn it back up all the way, you just start to get that. You get that additional. The oscillation, the noises from it, the whistly sound of it, and yeah, because if you turn, for warning, don't be careful playing with the resonance on a filter, because if you play normal notes, a synth or sound through a filter, and you turn the resonance all the way up and it self oscillates, it'll create howling, screaming, high pitched, loud, ear warning, loud noises. So be careful with that, But in this case, we're just getting those self oscillation plucks like that, and then into a delay, we're using about half dry, wet, and feedback. 40%. It's just because we want quite a mix of the delay in there. And then into a reverb. This is the space reverb preset of the Ableton stock reverb plugin. Again, if you go to audio effects and down to reverb, again, remember all these things, you can hit the triangle and open up the preset list there. So we get on to reverb, scroll down, and there's this one, space reverb. It's just, space, all that kind of terminology and reverbs and delays and stuff just implies, big sounding, So we've got a big reverb. All it is really, you can see they just have the decay turned way up and stereo turned up. Reflection is high, diffusion is high. Reflection in a reverb is like the sound reflecting on this in the space, like you clap your hands and you hear it bounce off the walls around you. That's reflection. Which can be often adjusted down to reduce, sometimes that reflection sound isn't that good. And then diffusion is like the clap in the room sound, the like clap, and then you hear the sound go, diffuse, spread out, out into the space. So diffusion is turned up high in this case to really give that spaciness to it. There are filters here for the high and low cut of the input, that you can adjust. This is like what the reverb is receiving. And generally, in a lot of cases, it's good to cut your reverb input to, say, like cut out the lows and extreme highs in a lot of cases. In this case, we're not playing a low sound. We don't really want a lot of low reverb, so it's got adjusted just down to cutting out a bit of that low frequency here. And same with the diffusion network here. This is the network of the diffusion of that sound, like I said. The diffusion amount here being set 40%. or whatever. And then the diffusion network, again, this is just an EQ where you can adjust the diffusion of that sound where it comes out. Cutting the lows a bit, you can see like 200 and something hertz, you know. Cutting the lows, reducing the highs a little bit. Yeah, 33% dry wet, just adjust to taste. Enough in like reverb and delay terms, it's generally good to have like enough of those effects that it gives you the effect you're looking for, but as little as possible. Because if you just fully saturate the stuff in reverb, then you'll just have way too much in your mix, you know? So with effects like that, a general kind of rule of thumb too, especially when you're starting out, is turn the effect down and turn it up and listen to it. And then think like, oh, okay, there it sounds good. And then turn it down. Yeah, just turn it down a little bit from what you think, you know, it sounded good at, because it'll still sound the same and fine. Then yeah, that just goes into an EQ where I'm really sloping off the lows. Just keeping, because these low sounds here just are not really, we want to reduce that in this sound design process. Pushing it up a little bit with makeup gain, and it has the clipper on the end just to, you know, clip off the end if it gets to that level, which it, you know, won't, but it's just whatever. And yeah, there we go, bubbly sound effect layer to it. And that I spent time explaining this thing of like bandpass filter into delay and reverb and stuff like that, because this is a very common kind of technique, repeated thing you'll see, and it's very common in psytrance to do this kind of theory here. Again, because like psychedelic sounding stuff, you know, it's like, oh, spacey, trancey, spacey with lots of reverb and delay and sounds, you know, very ethereal and all that. That's how, I mean, that's how you're creating these kinds of illusions, by using things like these tools. So moving on to the next sci-fi sound effect here, I got something clipped from a movie. Yeah, classic producing in general, and you know, something like listening to your favorite movies and stuff, and just recording sounds from it and sampling it. I think these are from The Fulfillment, you know, just random sci-fi noises and stuff, you know. In this case, I've got it playing back, just pretty straightforward in a sampler, again into a bit of delay, bit of reverb, bit of EQ, doing the same thing. Yeah. You know, yeah, sci-fi sounds, more sci-fi sounds. This one, again, same kind of thing, just recorded from something recorded from a movie, some kind of sci-fi movie with just like, you know, sci-fi spaceship ambience, you know, kind of thing. Yeah, just that playing back. Again, same kind of effects chain, reverb, a little bit of delay, a little bit of reverb. In this case, you can see I am reducing down the filter of what is going into the delay here. And that's where we just don't need the whole spectrum of frequency echoing into the delay, just pulling it down a little bit. And in the Ableton delay here, you've also got modulation down here, and you can modulate the time, rate, and filter. You can put some modulation into the filter, and that means that it'll move the filter around like this, you know. This is a built-in LFO modulation for it. And the rate, you can set the rate at something, yeah, like low. Hertz. Hertz is oscillations per second, right? So 1 hertz is 1 oscillation per second. Something like 0.25, you know, a quarter per second, you know, so, or an oscillation every 4 seconds. So that's to give you kind of ideas of like what a nice slow oscillation rate is. You know, I do like 0.22, 0.33, that kind of stuff, a lot. Yeah, but we got some sci-fi sounds layered up here, going into a SFX bus here where we just have some EQ treatment on it, again, ducking the lows out a little bit, and yeah. Atmospheric stuff, right? But then combined with the kick in the bass, you know. There we go. Psytrance, boom. With that, we got a pad playing here. I just went into the Ableton instruments here, into the operator, opened it up, typed in at the top here, the search, typed in pad, and then just went through a bunch of these pads. You know, just demoed a bunch of different pad presets here until I found one, loaded it on the track here, played some chords, starting with the root note, this D sharp. Again, this D sharp, the key of our track. And then I just made a simple like octave, multi-octave layer of that. Again, where I just like, I programmed in the note 4 bars long, and then I just selected it and hit Control C for copy, moved it up an octave and paste, and then move it down an octave, paste, move it down 2 octaves, paste. Yeah, just to, copy quickly up multiple octaves of it. And then moved it up a couple notes here. Yeah, that's again where basic music theory kind of approach. I was just playing the notes here on my keyboard. Oops, turn the arm this. And then figuring out what note sounded good with that. Remember that theory? I covered that in a previous lesson of like, you don't have to know full music theory by just experimenting and playing with notes and play 2 notes, hold 2 notes together and listen, does that sound like the vibe that I want for this track, or does it sound like crap, because if you play notes that don't go well together, if you hold the notes, it'll sound, well, you can see, oh, that one sounds cool, that one sounds mysterious, or something, it could be good, but this one, oh, those could sound nice together, And again, I'm just playing random notes together. But just playing some notes together and holding it and hearing how they sound together and thinking, well, is that the vibe that I want for this track? Like this sounded kind of cool. If you're making an obvious mistake and like playing 2 notes together that really sound bad, like well, those 2 notes together sounds what they call dissonant, where it sounds like spooky, scary, whatever, it could be good in the track if that's what you want. But anyways, just playing around with notes, starting with the root note of the track of what I want. And in this case, that's all I used, and then just a couple steps up to create this chord pattern of the pad sound. Pads, again, just being real long, drawn out sounds. And then I've got a filter here with the LFO action, just slowly going up and down in the low pass filter a bit to just give it some movement so it's just not all the same all the time. And then into a delay and a reverb. I was using the Eventide reverb in this case, whatever reverb, whatever reverb you want to use. Same principles though, delay into the reverb, a little bit of EQ there. Yeah, that's a pad. Yeah, pads combined with atmospheric sounds to give your general atmospheric ambiance, to your track. And then in this case, I'm dropping a lot of that when I get to the drop of the bass and the tune, actually. And then I bring it back a little bit more here, but yeah, generally you don't just want all sounds playing all the time. You want to break it up, give it variety and stuff. So that's the pad sound there. Oh yeah, I've got the bass notes. That's right, I was gonna show that. I've got the bass notes here where going back to the bass, back to the session view. Remember, I created these little clips here, just the repeating quarter bar phrase here of the kick and the bass. And then I click Shift, select those 2, Control C to copy them, and then go to the corresponding channels there and paste, and then just Control D to duplicate them out like that. And yeah, to just space them out. But then when I've got a million of those plugged in here like that, I would select a chunk of them like that, or you can select at the bus of the group here. You can just select via the whole group up there, and then hit Command J, and it groups them into a group like that, rather than having like a million little hits, you know. Like that. Hey, you can see that's what I've done with these other parts out here, grouping together. Anyways, that was just a side note I was going to mention. So yeah, I've got atmosphere as the pads here. A classic reverse cymbal, a little fade in here for the drop, you know. Yeah. Okay, getting down into the leads and more of like, you know, the identity of the track and stuff of the top end of, because we've got our kind of atmosphere things covered here. And then for leads, again, we're going to see common principles of what I just talked about. Like, again, more bandpass filters, you know. Not like it has to be that way, but it's just very common for certain things. So, okay, in this case, we've got, let's start at the top here on our leads. Oops, our leads bus here. Got a FM lead, so frequency modulation, FM, you know, frequency modulation of one, the frequency of, you know, the oscillator of, you know, the sound of one oscillator modulating the other, where the frequency of one oscillator here, again, I'm using operator as an example, because operator in this stack over here, you can change how the stack of all these oscillators, these four oscillators, how they're laid out here. Again, this was in an early video explaining synthesis. This one here, where they're all laid out side by side, that's additive synthesis, where they're just all being added together. Like one sound, the sound of one oscillator, the sound of this one, the sound of that one, they're all being added together and playing out the output. But in these orientations where they're stacked up on each other, like this one, where they're all stacked on top of each other, that is frequency modulation, where you can see it's really small, but you can see the lines from one oscillator box going down into the others. So the frequency of this is modulating the frequency of that one. So you're getting FM noise, FM synthesis, which, funny enough, again, if I Control A select, I'll turn this all off and turn just the synth back on. We're going to use, okay, this is like classic psytrance stuff, especially like dark side, forest, etc. Not like progressive psytrance, but like the more darker side of the psychedelic spectrum. And it's just interesting. Anyways, you're using frequency modulation to produce a sound that sounds kind of like crap. I mean, so let's listen to it with no effects here. Yeah, see? Ooh, lovely, right? Yeah, because they're just adjusting these frequencies, or the frequency here and the volume of that, to get some kind of grindy sound. Yeah, sounds like crap, right? Sounds terrible. But put that through the bandpass filter, you know, and the delay and the reverb. Yeah, see, it's just kind of like how some dubstep type sounds sound really awful like that. If you were just to listen to them sustained, just like grinding out, you'd be like, oh god, that sounds terrible. But then when it's broken up into little bits by a filter and stuff, you're like, ooh, now it sounds cool. Just the way this does too. So we've got that awful FM sound here. So again, you can see this is a very different approach. I mean, this is cool. It's a different approach to sound design, which is what makes psychedelic trance, not like prog psy and stuff like that. Like what makes psychedelic sound design really fun is you're doing things generally totally differently than other style of music. You know, like most styles of music, you're trying to make something that sounds like nice, right? You know, like I want an FM lead that sounds like whatever. Oh, here, I'll type in FM for, you know, and we get some examples here in the presets, like actually, I just realized you guys can't hear that because it's being just fed to my headphone output. But, you know, generally speaking, like you're using FM. FM's a powerful synthesis method to get all these cool sounds, like the sound of a bell or a string or something or whatever. You know, you can see all these piano, harpsichord, different stuff. You can create a really complex sound design with FM, and that's what you're doing in most cases with most music, you know. But in psychedelic sound design, you're creating weird sounds, you know, because psychedelic shit is weird, right? You know, so you're kind of breaking all the rules, which is just really fun. So you make this. I mean, okay, I'll turn this down a little bit. You can still hear it, but yeah, volume, you know, warning for this, oops, nasty sound. But you can hear, like, how did I make this sound? Well, okay, so we just go back to, we'll init all of this synth. You open up operator, and you just get this. Turn the filter off to have all the shit turned off. It's just the oscillator. No, not that yet. Just turn this oscillator on, and I've got a saw wave. Just a saw wave playing here. Full saw wave, nothing. Just like that. The notes I have plugged in, just the root note, just hammering the root note a bunch of times on my keyboard. Nothing, it doesn't matter, you know, basically. You can just have a sustained note, but then it's just like a sustained, like broken up, like bum, 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 just tapping it a bunch of times in a rhythmic fashion. And then it's playing a saw wave here. Okay, cool. Now let's add FM to it. Start turning this one up. And then I changed the course, the pitch on this. You know? Yeah, there. There, we got some grindy FM noise, right? But then, now you put it through the magic of the bandpass filter into the delay and the reverb. And yeah, see? Okay, so, and again, that's why I took the time to explain this concept, because it's the same thing we're doing. Bandpass filter, delay, reverb, bit of EQ on the end. But here we add something new into it. The trance gate. Now, a gate is just a gate, you know, lets things in, right? Or not. A gate, open and close, you know, like a door. And so here you can see a gate plugin. This is a kilohertz free plugin pack that I linked in the Discord. You can download this and all these other, go into kilohertz. Where are you? Here we go, kilohertz. And then you have all these KHS plugins here that are all free. And they're good. So grab that free pack. You know, it's linked in the plugins tab on the Discord server. And so there's a gate plugin there too. Now this is what's called a trance gate. Okay, so gates of like letting the sound in and out, chopping it up basically, are so commonly used in trance music because you can play one long sustained note, right? Just one long note, but then if you chop it up like ba 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 ba, like ooh, and then it's, you know, it's rhythmic and sounds cool. And that became so common in trance music that they just call it a trance gate actually at this point. Oh, I just remember that there's a really cool Melda gate. Melda rhythmizer, isn't it? Yeah, Melda Rhythmizer is another really cool one too. That's a different style of trance gate where you have like sloping stuff and whatever. Anyways, so this is a trance gate where you can see it's spinning around. It's playing at a 16th. The length of the current pattern here tells you 16 steps. And then you just turn these on and off, these steps on and off. So if you turn it off, you know, it just breaks up those notes into rhythmic chunks and sounds cool. So there, not a lot of thought going into that, just trance gate after the bandpass filter to break up the notes going into the delay and the reverb. And there we go. We got an FM lead here, you know. And then I just made a variation of it here. Same pattern, same kind of thing. I changed up, I just selected a different pattern here in the trance gate. So it's just playing a different rhythm, slightly changed the filter a little bit, and just playing a different FM sound. Just have some variation, you know? Yeah, I made a third one. This one I just made the sweep of the filter a lot slower with a different rhythm, and so it just sounds really different FM sound. Yeah, just so that's another concept in just music production in general, especially stuff like this. You make a sound, and then just make some variations of it so that you can bounce around between the two. You can make different more complex arrangements of it. Like you could just layer these. Like you could just layer them together and turn them off, and then just like bounce around, between like having them on and off at different times, You could do that stuff where you just have some variety. Oops, but I cut the MIDI note in the front off. Yeah, into a breakdown. And I've just got the little transition made there by, I made a riser here in Operator where I showed this once before. A riser is just rising, right? So I use the pitch envelope here, just turn the pitch envelope up to 100% and turn the initial part of it down and the peak of it way up and spread it out over a long period. And then just play the long sustained note to get this riser sound here. And I have the LFO turned on. Going to the filter so that I get the LFO gives it that, that wobble, that just keeps getting faster and faster. As with the riser, because it's working the filter there. Yeah, delay, reverb, if you could guess. Little riser there, another little rise sound of just a sample here. So I'm kind of just I think I recorded that from a movie too. Reverse cymbal here, just creating that little. Yeah. And you could also see I created variations of the kick bass pattern, like, so you've got the kick bass plugging along and then it's chopped up to create different variations of it here, like this part. Yeah, just that's just playing Legos with the MIDI pattern, just cutting it up and moving it around and putting, kicks wherever and bass patterns just to create something cool. But as you do that though, remember that you want to replicate whatever you did in your trigger pattern as well. remember you have the triggers, which are mirroring what you're playing for the kick, for your kick triggers. So as I cut them up, I'm cutting up this whole column of this stuff here, and then, you know, putting it wherever so that you still have that trigger firing on those kick hits. That and just like common classic stuff of just like cutting the end off of a transition period, like every, you know, 16 or 8 bars, 32 bars, etc., just to give that end turnaround sound, you know. Yeah, adding some variety to the kick bass pattern, like that. And then down here is where I kind of shifted into like a different kind of approach to trance. Did like this kind of classic super saw type, big trancey lead stuff that people don't do in like psychedelic trance so much, but they do in other parts of trance music, which I like too. Like more, this is more like ravey 90s, you know, trance techno kind of stuff. I created this pattern down here, just an ARP pattern of these notes here. The filter is down right there, but they created this lead in, this is just Serum. Again, you could do this with any plugin that gives you unison on an oscillator or two. Remember the super saw sound is just unison. It's just you can see here it's just changing the number of instances of that oscillator playing together, and then adjusting the detune of that and the blend of those oscillators together to create that wide super sound. So, you know, just have a little bit of distortion and compressor, multiband compressor on that. Nothing much, just these two. I got fancy with this when I put the envelope, or no, I put this, what did I do? Huh? What's on this? Okay, go to the matrix and see what's connected to it. B level, envelope 2, oh, yeah. Oh, I just have this small plucky envelope here, just put on the level of the second oscillator. Just giving it a little bit more movement. It's not like it really matters, you know, honestly. You could even just turn that off. And you've already got the super saw pattern, but in this case, I've got an octave down, and a second oscillator just at octave 0 here, so they high and low put together. And then I've got a low pass filter sweep, again, sweeping up just in this, you know, down here in the breakdown to the drop here, delay reverb. So the drop goes like this then. Shit, I have my mic off. Okay. Yeah, so that's just more this super trancey, progressive trance, lead kind of thing. I mean, it sounds cool in this case. So it's not like you couldn't do that inside trance. It's just that these big, big, like hands in the air kind of lead sounds, are just like a different kind of, just a different vibe, different genre. But yeah, it sounded cool with the FM lead here combined together. Again, a big part of that psychedelic and, trancey sound design thing. Again, more common in like psychedelic trance than, melodic or progressive or whatever trance, is layering of stuff. But then again, done to taste, so that it's not overwhelming. What else? Yeah, in the breakdown of the track here, you can see I've got the gap here around the 2-minute, 3-minute mark, just the breakdown in the middle. That can often be it's just like a repeat of the stuff from the intro. Here we've got the pad and the sound effects, the atmospheric sounds just playing again. Just those things playing again. And then I dropped in percussions again here. I used a high pass filter in this filter here to sweep down from high frequencies, sweep down the percussions. Again, filtering to just give movement. Oh shit, I didn't talk about percussions yet. Okay, simple. Hi-hat, closed hi-hat sample. Just repeating, like this. If you want to give variety to some pattern like this, you could literally play, again, I've got a quarter of a measure here in 4/16 notes hits where, you just like click in like that and see like, well, this is one measure. You could just loop this section of a quarter measure. And then that's what I've got just looping out, here. You could just play one and repeat it. That's the same thing. You could add some variety to it by adjusting the velocity. These things down here on the bottom, you could adjust the velocity, which is, the volume of those hits. You could just give them some variation to give it a little bit of a shuffle. Actually going to do that the opposite way because it's covered by the kick on the first hit anyways. Yeah, just those percussion tricks of just giving it some velocity differences so it gives it a little bit of a shuffle sound, just instead of just being like the exact same hit every single time. Put the volume up again after that. Yeah, simple, real just filtered EQ down into the highs, up into the highs, and then an open hi-hat pattern, just here. Same kind of thing. I'm using the high-pass filter in the sampler here just to cut a bit of those lows out anyways. You don't even have to do that. I'm just using the EQ to do the same thing, but, it's just part of the approach. I'm using in Ableton and in just other samplers, it's the same thing, but loading a hi-hat sound. I could just put the hi-hat sound into an audio track here and play with it, just lay it out in the same way. But in the sampler, it can give you a different degree of control, mostly from the filter and the envelope of the amplitude envelope here. So down here, you can see there's the envelope, the ADSR, the attack decay of the amplitude envelope here. And with the sustain up, it could just be, yeah, you can see that here. Here's the amp envelope here. With the sustain up, it's just the sound, here just plays and plays full volume the whole time. If you turn that down, the sustain down, then the control of the decay changes how long the sound plays for. And then you can adjust, for example, the hi-hat sound, the length of that here. You could adjust it down to the right length of the sample you want to play here. You can see it playing now. And that's another way you can give like movement or something to a song is you could automate that decay length and make it go, longer as it gets, here where it goes from playing like that kind of thing. just variations and samples like that, like making the hats get longer and longer and longer over a little drawn out period can give some movement to it or something. And then I have a snare here, snare sound. This is playing a different pattern because I have it playing a wind up, kind of typical kind of cheesy, like wind up, like, you know, like clap, 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 ticka, 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 you know, kind of build up here, like just, but notes playing like this, and then just double that pace here, double that pace here, you know. But yeah, playing that wind up. What they're really playing is that, you know, on the other beat that on the two snare pattern here, like this stuff here. Yeah, I've got transient shaping on that just to give the attack more of a boost it up a little bit so that it punches through. And yeah, that's the percussion bus here. Yeah, and then again, just playing with a variety of that, just having them all, like I turn the open hi-hat on and off sometimes, the snare on and off in different cases, just whatever sounds good, really. And yeah, that's the percussion. I've got this different, yes, clap pattern here to do the build up to the build pattern here. And yeah, then the big super saw drop here. And then I did a couple more lead sounds here. This one, it changes into this one here then. Yeah, again, this is kind of a more of a trance, you know, sound. I'm using Silent 1 for this example again. It is, again, it's not like you have to use silence for it, but this is just like some sound I already had, you know, from the past. The core of what this is doing here, you see the, you see the arpeggiator here, the arpeggiator tab. Because what we're doing again is pretty simple. It's like you can see we've got oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 both playing square waves, and this one's playing, and they both have 8 voices of unison going. This one's playing a normal square wave. This one's playing a half square wave, where it's, you see the shape of the square wave is a little bit smaller there, and then just the pitch and cut off of the filter being modulated a little, cut off the filter sweeping back and forth. Again, bandpass filter. Yeah, Silence is dope. Silence has like really good virtual analog sound. I mean, all Audisons do, you know, but this one is just, I don't know, just, you know, just one of the OGs, you know, like you have to use it. But again, that example, and then just a little bit of distortion. This is fold back distortion. This is wave folding distortion, which has a really gnarly sound to it. That's part of what gives it this characteristic sound in this case here, of this and then delay, the built-in ping pong delay, so it bounces back and forth, left to right, left to right. And what's really giving it the characteristics is the arpeggiator playing a pattern, which I replicated it kind of here in Serum, so you can see a little clearer, more clear what makes that sound the way it is. So the pattern it's playing, as you can see from the arpeggiator in Silent, that it's going here. It's going 0 plus 10, 0 plus 12, 0, 0 plus 12, page 2, 0 plus 10 plus 13, 0, 0, 15. And these arrows on the top are slides or hold where it goes legato. It goes smoothly it holds from one note over to the next, but it doesn't have on these here. That's what creates these smooth pattern with this broken up taka 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 part here like that. So I replicated that in the MIDI notes here. We open this up. You can see I've got notes that go from 1 from one to the next like this. They're all smoothly playing into each other. And then here we've got them shortened so that they are broken up and play a similar type pattern here. And so again, we've got our two square waves, both with 8 voices of unison, one normal square wave and one shrunk down square wave where you can adjust, you can reduce the width of the wave split there. Playing into a bandpass filter with a little bit of distortion. Serum doesn't have fold back distortion, but it's got linear fold and sine wave fold distortion, so which gets really gnarly. It can really wreck it a lot if you just listen to this like turned up, and so just adjust to the sweet spot. Yeah, just adjusted like that to taste. And playing that pattern, and there we go. We got a similar, so in this case, this is where I made just a variation of where I had like the one synth voice playing this part here, then made a variation of it that's similar, same, but different, kind of just to add variety to it. And yeah, just dropped it into another, another melodic, change part of the track here, Yeah, I'm just into the end. So, okay, we could go back to the kick bass bus, turn the filter back on for this end point, go to the section where you select the filter type, automate that into, will tell me, high pass filter, and then automate the frequency there to give this sweep up like this in the end, just something like that to give it a movement or whatever. Ableton automation, you can click and draw multiple points to kind of, change how you want it to flow instead of just a straight line. You can also hold down, you can also press Alt, and then you see your key, your arrow, cursor, your mouse arrow change there, and then you can drag and adjust the curve of you give it an exponential curve like that too. You can do things that way. You can also just be like, well, I want it to be at this point, this middle part here, and then give it a curve like that. Yeah, so, you know, some more filter automation like that on the end. And yeah, there we go. We basically got the just a couple different sections of examples into the basics of a psytrance tune. As far as mixing it and all that, in my previous lessons, I've talked about how if you're properly managing the levels of each individual track and EQing them, you know, shaping them to how you want them to be sounding, and then adjusting the level and the overall output volume level with the channel, with the fader of the channel that they're in, then a lot of your work mixing is already done. Whereas if you don't do any of that and you just make a bunch of sounds, have a bunch of channels with a bunch of sounds put together, and then go and try to mix it, then it's like, oh god, now it's a mess because nothing is like kind of fit into its place. So overall mix down, again, similar themes to stuff from the past. Overall, because of the nature of the style of music, I have it divided up in different ways, where I've got the kick bass in its own bus here, because those are loud, independent voices. We want to cut through. We want to be heard overall loud in the mix. So they're in their own channel group here, their own bus. Percussion, I have it in its own percussion bus as well, because of how it was being treated with the side chain, where I have a little bit of side chaining going on here with the kick, but only 24% here. Because if I played these two together, if I really turned up the side chaining too much, it would just be completely cutting out the first part of that kick. You know, where the kick hits here would be cutting out this first hi-hat sound here. So if I really turned it up, it would just be losing that, like, and you can hear it sounds a little funny. So I just have that done a little lightly, just ducking the kick, ducking the percussion bus a little bit for the kick. And then that's in its own separate group as well. But then everything else I have in the sidechain bus here, all the atmospheres and the leads and pads and all that kind of stuff, sound effects, that I all have into a sidechain bus here, where the whole group is being sidechained, you know, to the kick and the snare. I have a separate sidechain channel created here for the snare, playing the snare pattern. It's being sent to the second, you know, shaper box. Again, I'm using shaper box in this case. You could do it different ways, like I've gone over before, using click tracks, or just using like the built-in, the native compressor from Ableton, where you just have the compressor over here and then the side chain. You have to open up that side button here. Sidechain, external source, you can select the kick or whatever, you know, here, and then have that coming in. You could have it sidechained that way, you know. I'm using Shaperbox just because I like how it just gives you really precise control over the timing and the amounts and all that stuff here. But yeah, just the same concepts though, of having the kick and the snare sidechained a bit in the sidechain bus, so that everything else in the track is being bounced back and forth, you know, being ducked for the kick and the snare a little bit, so that they come through really clearly. You can see the waveforms of them playing here in these areas. Yeah. Sidechaining is something you don't want to overdo, because it can sound real disorienting and really weird if you're just like pumping the track like super hard, like way too hard, you know? Like if I really turn this up and down. It's just like a little too much. I just want to be ducking it enough so that that kick and stuff comes through really clearly. And in that sidechain bus, the EQ I'm using is cutting out the low sub area anyways, so our sub of our bass here, again, I'll keep this EQ of the sidechain bus open, go to the bass channel, open the EQ of the bass, and we can see that, you know, there's some overlap, you know, and we could sidechain that a little bit too if we wanted, but honestly, the overlap of the bass, you can see this one on the left here is playing the bass sound. We're mostly concerned with the low end sub of this anyways, and you can get more technical into futzing with that, but it's sounding okay because yeah, it's sounding all right. So then overall mixing, so I have, you know, again, going back to the theory of having the individual sound, like the synthesizer or whatever, playing in the channel, and then having the gain staging management and the EQ management and the output gain staging management being done, and then the overall level of the output on the channel adjusted by the fader, and then similar sounds being grouped into a group or a bus where that is, again, getting a final staging of processing. It's not micromanaging it. You generally want to avoid micromanaging stuff and just driving yourself crazy by trying to get way too granular with way overdoing things. But then that flow of the instrument into the level management out of the channel fader volume management into a bus or a group of similar sounds, like atmospheres, sound effects, synthesizer leads, that kind of stuff. So that they can all be managed, you know, together, and it kind of helps them gel together too as well if they're playing at the same time. And then those groups going out into the master, you know, the next level up of the group of the sidechain bus, all being, you know, generally are gently sidechained and, you know, massaged to fit with the bass and the kick, and having its, you know, little level management and EQ and stuff done to it as well. And then in the end, you have those three things coming out to the master bus here. I didn't use the return descend effects here. You just delete those. I didn't use those. I used the effects in line. In this case, rather than as sends, I used the delays and reverbs right on the channels, which is, you know, it's just a preference of whatever you're doing at the time. And then, yeah, in this case, in the main channel, as you can see, again, I've just got level. This stuff is just for the streaming output here. And then this is my headphone monitoring software here, so that you're not hearing any of that stuff. It's just got a limiter on it a little bit here. Limiter was just pumping it a little bit, not even too much. You could do a few other things, like in Ableton specifically, there was this new thing in 12 called Roar, which is some kind of cool kind of multi-band saturation, etc. plugin that gives, yeah, split into low, medium, low, mid, and high bands here. Each has an amount of a shaper, like a wave shaper, in other words, distortion, saturation, shaping, and a filter here, and yeah, some overall drive, you know, like an amp simulation drive thing, and to the different bands here. So that was kind of interesting to play with a little bit. I just turned this up a little bit. Yeah, I don't know too much about this plugin. It's but there's just stuff like that generally, okay, I'll stick to what I can demonstrate more clearly. Use something like the tube amp from that free Voxengo tube amp plugin, where it's an amp plugin. You're just adding a bit of drive to it. Not that you can distort the shit out of it, but you're not doing that in this case. Just giving a little bit of boost. You know, just a bit of mixing, final stage, and the master channel, that kind of thing. Yeah, no, that's basically it. You guys have any questions or any, because we got a couple people still here, is there anything you guys wanted to ask about or go over again or whatever? That's basically it. We walked through the whole tune, start to finish, top to bottom. And yeah, the only other thing is using a reference track, of course, to reference, how did things sound? Again, as always, like referencing a tune to go back and forth to hear, like, well, how loud is the kick in comparison to the bass, and how loud is the percussion, the hi-hats in relation to the overall mix, how loud is the leads and that kind of stuff. Just, a reference for making these decisions about how it should sound, what you want to do with any track using the reference track. In this case, these reference tunes are obviously going to sound a lot more badass than our tune, because they're have a lot more work done to them by some really talented folks. But same kind of concept applies. You'll notice in like the reference track, for example, these the kick and the bass in relation are a lot. The leads and the lead sounds and those things are a lot louder in the overall mix, because, like I said, being played in a club environment or a psytrance, event or something, this is a really loud sound, a huge sound system with all this, in a function one kind of type systems pumping this kick bass, which is very, very, it's steady. It's different than dubstep or something like that, where it comes and goes. The dubstep, like the bass like ebbs and flows in and out. The trance bass is like really steady, just this constant, flow of sound. So having everything else, like the leads and the atmosphere and the other top end stuff, having that come through the mix, clearly enough in that case is really important. So we can just check that for a second. Again, for the reference tracks, I've got the way you really want to be using this is not playing them through your main channel, your master channel, because then it's playing it through whatever effects you have down here. But you'd play it just through the direct extension out of your sound card here. But if I do that, you guys can't hear it in the stream. So I just turn this stuff off and yeah, just listen to it. Yeah, anyways, we just pretend in this case. So we'll just listen to it and make some, like, just notice some things about the sound.
Right subject, right music, right time to really.
Yeah, first thing I notice right away is you hear how dry the kick and the bass are. Dry meaning like they don't sound really big. They're definitely not the loudest thing in the mix. They're actually kind of quieter than you would think, because, like you're listening to it on your speakers at home or your headphones and thinking, yeah, the pounding bass and the kick pounding sounds awesome. But like I just said, in a club sound system or being played back in a huge festival or something, that means that the kick and bass would just be way too loud. So in this case, you listen to how kind of dry, meaning like they don't have like the sub boosted, the sounds are pretty minimal. Like, again, the psytrance, the bass sound is just this kind of like da 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 kind of sound that's really not that crazy. But you listen to that, how it sounds in this case. Kick in the bass. Yeah, and all the other sounds are way louder than the kick and the bass. And, the kick and the bass are just there. They're, in terms of the sound stage, meaning like how loud sounds are, giving it a sense of being front or back, foreground or background, and panning, obviously being left or right. The kick and the bass are kind of somewhere in the back, in terms of compared to the rest of the leads. So let's now compare that to our tune here. Yeah, the kick is way louder, and there's more boom and sub to it overall, so I'd go through and just kind of change that, maybe even take down some of that air. Reduce it. Yeah. Because like I said, the kick and the bass are plenty loud when it's played back in the intended environment. Let's check this Arjuna tune. Yeah, you can hear all those leads and the sound effects and stuff are really loud because those are the sounds you want flying out of the speakers in the swirling mix of, a lot of sound design happening at once. In these kind of psychedelic mixes like this, you could generally think it's kind of like you've got the kick and the bass as the foundation in the back. They're not low volume, like you can still hear them, but they're in the back. And then like standing in front of them is the atmosphere that kind of those like, swirling atmospheric sounds like a big fog covering everything. And then standing in front of that, standing forward through that are all the leads and the sound effects, those kind of like, loud sounds that are the ones that are like jumping out and getting you in the face kind of thing, because that's how the sound feels when you're hearing it in a big, live environment. And that's what creates this real sense of depth. That's what's so psychedelic and cool about psytrance, is that it creates this very deep, like you feel like you're swimming in it, that's why it's called forest psytrance, because it feels like you're kind of like you're, journeying through a enchanted forest, or whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting style of music. It's very creative in very different ways than most other styles of music, which is really fun. Like compare like drum and bass or something, or dubstep, where you want like a lot of singular sounds, like jumping out and smacking you with like bow, 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 bow kind of things happening really clearly. And it's just a totally different approach to creating a musical environment with psytrance, especially with normal trance, or normal, I say like, melodic or, not non-psychedelic, focused trance music too. It's similar in that way too, but it's obviously different. That's where I tried to show with this kind of super saw part, more of this, this kind of drop, like the that has more in common with the EDM dance music we're familiar with, because it's like a big lead, big sound in your face, kind of thing. Whereas psytrance is a lot more kind of layered and, creating this kind of deep atmospheric experience. But yeah, anyways, there we go. That was about it. Unless you guys got any questions or any things you want to shout out about, let me know. But yeah. Psytrance is an interesting style of music for those reasons I was just talking about. The sound design approach is very different, like making those weird sounds and whipping them through filters and delays and into reverbs and stuff, and creating all this, very, experimental and interesting psychedelic, sounds. It is fun, yeah. So all right. Well, it's been fun going through this with you guys. Thanks for sticking around. And as always, if you got any questions, comments, etc., let me know in the chat. Yeah, to recap, also grab those kilohertz plugins and the free Voxengo plugins. And yeah, you guys are welcome. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you for tuning into the session, and it's been fun going through this. Trance is a fun style of music. I'll definitely do some more in the future. I got some old, when I used to make psytrance more, I got some other projects from the past I can go through, and that'll be cool in the future. So yeah, cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks. Have a good night.